So I wanted us to talk a little bit about kind of what's happening with the government shutdown, just kind of what's happening environmentally and all that nonprofits have to respond to. Um, because there's a lot going on right now, and let's just kind of totally set politics, aside. But there is a lot going on environmentally right now, and it's already really difficult to run a nonprofit in the best of times. But when you add this layer of uncertainty, it really increases the pressure and the strain on the organizations. And let's face it, when we talk about organizations, we really mean the people within the organizations. And so what I'm curious about is kind of like what do we do to care for one another in these times? Like, and how do we do that? I mean, this is the work that we do in nonprofits for a large part really is personal. So, how do we care for each other um, doing this work in times where there's great uncertainty? But I'm just kind of curious to know what comes to mind for you, Greg, as you lead Keystone Alliance through these times of uncertainty.
It's it is just insane to think of the waves that we've experienced of uncertainty and trauma and loss. If you look back, look at it through a 5 year lens, then look at it through a 25-year lens. You have the economic downturn that landed in between 9/11 and COVID, and now here we are. And it's very difficult to put your arms around kind of on any level, just as a human walking around. And so this most recent chapter of uncertainty, I think it's, for me at least, it's the same answer as it was, especially during COVID. Just connect,
Mm-hmm.
reach out to folks, make sure there's a presence that as a leader I try to bring into the room. There are times when you get overwhelmed by the busyness of the list, the day, the week, the project, and sometimes you fail to connect with the human across the table from you. And I feel like one of my COVID lessons was that's not okay in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like this is almost an inverted version of that, where COVID
Mm.
happened. You had the event, and then we were managing the event until it was resolved. And now it's like we don't really know the shape of the event. It's what we know is that something's going to happen. Things are likely going to become more challenging, but we don't know exactly when or how much. And so it's the logic of it is shifted around a little bit, but I feel like it's the same net answer is to just try to connect with folks and make sure, if there's something going on, at the very least, you're a set of ears to listen and maybe a set of hands to help them carry what they're working on.
Yeah, like I have so many responses to what you're saying because it totally resonates, right? I think, on one hand, the times where I failed the most as a leader was when I didn't pause and recognize what was personally going on, right? Or spend time, just creating that space. I might not be able to change, and chances are I can't change how somebody feels, but just being able to create that space and acknowledging what somebody is feeling, a colleague is feeling, I think can be very impactful. And I think my greatest regrets as a leader is not making time for that, being so focused on we got to get this thing done, or there's 5 million things that have to get done, and feeling that sense of overwhelm when your to-do list is way longer than there is any amount of time to be able to complete all of that. So as you were talking, that's one of the thoughts that I've had, and the that I've had. And then the other thing that I feel kind of bubbling up for me is this idea of we are in a highly competitive environment and culture just generally in our country, right? And yet nonprofits really thrive when they're much more collaborative And that collaborative part requires high emotional intelligence and a focus on relationship. And yet, in the environment in which we operate, the reward is around being competitive.
Yeah.
And the need to be able to recognize the personal and recognize the relationship and being able to pause when the environment in which we're in says race, 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 you got to get to the finish line before everybody else.
Yeah, there's no question. And I mean, we joke about it all the time, the number of hats that we wear as a nonprofit professional at any level of the organization. And in this particular case, I think most organizations were in some state of speeding up and pursuing growth goals as well, right? Like
Yeah.
whenever the pandemic kind of ended is a subjective thing for each organization and where it was culturally and programmatically, but everybody that we're in contact with is like, yep, we got this really exciting new strategic plan, or we're building out this new program or a new building. And so I think that there's an additional layer of loss where it's like we're finally getting back to work. And so it is like
Yes.
it's almost like not not to be Pollyanna about the situation, or Pollyanna-ish, English maybe, but like not to be overly optimistic about the situation, but all indications are that we'll be able to get back to our growth goals, but this does require a little bit of slowing down and consideration of what's happening, because the shifts are significant right now for organizations receiving direct federal funding, but we don't know what the ripples are going to be off of this. And I think they're, combined with, again, so many of the other things happening, especially in Chicago right now in early October, is, it gives people, it kind of shakes their confidence,
Yeah.
shakes their, you know, it just, I think it's a potential burnout phase where it's like, dude, this is crazy talk. I'm trying to do the right thing for my community, the community, this organization, what have you, and the rug keeps getting pulled out. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of that we've been here for, fill in the blank on your organization's number of decades. We've all been here for a very long time, and we will persist. We will see our way through. It's just tricky because we don't really know where the barriers are going to emerge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, what I'm hearing you talk about is this, like, there is this level of hope that comes with a strategic plan, right? Like there's this hope for a brighter, more impactful future than where you are today, right? That's the whole kind of purpose of a strategic plan, is how do you do more? How do you increase the impact of your organization? And when you have to feel like you've got to pause that, it feels like you're taking major steps back. And I think what I would challenge all of us to think about is how can you still move forward on that vision despite these obstacles, right? In that, because that provides the hope piece. And when we don't
Yep.
have hope, we give up, and we are okay with the status quo or a new status quo. And that should never be okay with us. And it should never be okay that we're losing hope. Like I find myself having to personally really be disciplined about my meditation practice, because that's what helps give me hope during all of these challenges, right? And it gives me that time to be able to focus on the gratitude piece and keep me in a place where I feel like I've got agency and the ability to do something, versus feeling really helpless, which is easy to feel given all that is going on right now.
Yeah. I've been focusing on my burrito practice, which I think has different outcomes than yours. But no, it is. I mean, it's interesting. I never even thought about that frame, that we as a field don't accept the current state of play, however you define it. We are here to have that positive impact. And right now there's this interrupting force, and it's very
Yes.
hard to either see around that barrier or assume how that barrier is going to be overcome.
Yeah.
And again, I think it all comes back to just the reassurance, providing it's almost like that, almost like pure coaching, not to motivate people, but just it's we're gonna the best way to get through this kind of thing is just like all the others and to be together.
Yep.
And that's when we're at our strongest, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and actually, I'm seeing more and more folks do that, right? It is about how do we do stuff together. And it might not be these formal collaborations, but it is having more of these conversations with other organizations that they might not have had before. So I think there's this undercurrent of how do we, and I think that will ultimately be a superpower here for this sector for nonprofits is how can we do things together? And that togetherness really is that superpower, that antidote.
Yeah. Well, and I think go back to the question you asked earlier before I started talking about burritos was the kind of we're used to the strategic plan being the source of optimism, and now it's paused, and that gives people concern. And then the question is, which components of it can we continue to drive forward
Yeah.
on? And a lot of strategic plans that we've worked on and seen, including our own, include succession work.
Mm-hmm.
Which invariably is linked to organizational culture work, team building, so on and so forth. So you have kind of that path, and then back to the connecting outside of the four walls of the organization. Many organizations have partnership strategies. They could
Mm-hmm.
be as robust as a merger strategy, but wherever it is, it's how can we connect. We know there's going to be a squeeze on resources, or we strongly suspect there's going to be a squeeze on resources. Therefore, who's doing this thing that's a nice to have for us, but it's their core competency, and how can we try to come together and
Right.
see if we can get 1 to 1, 1 plus 1 to equal 3.
Yep.
So those are kind of a couple things that come to my mind, and then it is just funny to think about internally at Keystone Alliance. It's a coincidence, but I mean, we're really buckling down on a lot of internal efficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that we can't let, with the external world being wacky, for lack of a better term, and try not to swear. It's what can we do to button up as many things
Right.
internally, for the long run. So those are kind of three things I think we can put positive, productive energy into that'll then have returns on the other side of the uncertainty.
So you've got kind of focusing on greater efficiency. You just said three things, so I want to make sure I want to recapture these three things. So focusing on efficiencies. Number two was
Partnerships,
partnerships, yes. And number three,
I brought up succession,
yep.
but it's however you. I mean, to me, that's org culture,
And leadership development.
sustainability. Yeah, it can be leadership
Yep.
development, broad succession stuff, short-term succession stuff, or just where how are we living our values? Is it time to check in with the team on those and have that chat?
Well, and in a way, what I'm hearing those three things are really around investing. So you're investing in, partnership. You're investing in leadership development or succession planning. You're investing in how do you do things differently? How do you become more efficient? So in this time of uncertainty, one of the strategies is around how do you invest or reinvest?
Absolutely.